It's weird because I've often thought what it would be like to be trapped on an alien world. We've seen it in the movie The Martian, where Matt Damon gets stuck there on Mars, and we've seen it in a lot of other movies and TV shows over the years. And now here's the opportunity for you to experience it yourself. The release of Aphelion has you stuck there in a newly discovered ninth planet in our solar system. The planet is called Persephone, and it's perhaps humanity's last best chance for survival, and you're out there to try and make sure we can survive. At least that is the principle. But after a disaster, things going wrong, you've really got to try and survive for yourself, and also try and rescue a crew member as well who is injured. I've been waiting for this game for quite a while now, and fortunately I was given access to it a little bit earlier so I could get this video out there. So my thanks to the developers Don't Nod for sponsoring this video. Do check out the links in the video description where you can find out everything you need to know. What makes Aphelion interesting then, at least to me, is its focus on both environment as well as story. And if either of those things interest you, then you should find something of value in Aphelion. And if they both interest you, then this could well be a game for you. The world itself, Persephone, is starkly beautiful. In other words, it's both beautiful as well as terrifying at the same time. And the poor protagonists in the game have a lot of trouble along the way, but at the same time make quite a few pretty amazing and spectacular discoveries. It's also worth pointing out that you may have noticed a specific logo in this game that the characters are wearing on their spacesuits. That's the ESA logo, the European Space Agency, and they were very much involved in this game, offering their advice and research along the way to keep the game as grounded as possible in real-world science in the areas that it really counts. Now, you've already no doubt noticed in the footage that we've seen already throughout the video that the game is very much an adventure one, an action-adventure, let's put it that way, where a lot of the focus is on both traversal as well as surviving in the environment. A lot of stealth mechanics going in there as well, particularly because of the Nemesis, which you'll see a little bit later on, who is quite a threat for you along the way, and you'll encounter that particular, should we call it a beast, a monster, an alien, multiple times throughout your journey. Now, it's kind of curious as to how to approach this video the best, because obviously it is very heavily story focused, and as such it's kind of hard to both show the game as well as talk about it without offering too much in the way of spoilers. So what I've decided to do is, for the first 4 or 5 minutes of the video, we'll just give some general overviews and general principles of the way the game works, and for the second half of the video we'll get into more story focused content, and that will allow you to skip the parts that you don't want to see, or alternatively watch the whole thing. Now, if any of you are familiar with Don't Nod's other games, such as Life is Strange, you'll already be very aware of how heavy of a story focus that this title is likely to have. And yes, it's also a little bit of a tragedy as well, as you'll no doubt notice right at the start with the disaster that the character experiences right up front. But it's also more than that, because really, it's very much about relationships as well, between the main character here as well as the other character who's been injured along the way, Thomas. Fortunately, and perhaps most interestingly, you get the opportunity to play both of these characters. A story plays out from both points of view as you alternate control between the two different characters, with some chapters being focused on Ariane and other chapters being focused on Thomas. They also have their own distinct gameplay elements. Ariane is all about athletics as well as stealth and needing to climb a lot of places, and talking of which, you may have noticed in a few clips of this video there's the traditional, at this point in many type of traversal games, yellow markers of what areas you've got to climb. But do keep in mind that is only in the initial chapter, and beyond that those yellow painted areas will actually disappear. View it as a form of tutorial, I guess. Thomas, meanwhile, who is injured, obviously can't throw himself around in the same way as the other character, and that means your movement is a lot slower, but also in many ways far more dangerous for it, because you're going to need to rely on stealth far more often. Thomas is also restricted when it comes to oxygen, and you'll find as you're moving through the game, the limited oxygen tank runs out pretty fast. You've got to find oxygen tanks along the way where you've got this cable, this pipe that will extend a certain distance, and then it will cut off once you extend beyond that. And that in turn keeps pressure on you to constantly find a fresh bout of oxygen. But also it means there's other puzzles to solve, such as navigating around the environment and locating the things you need to discover. I think it's also important to keep in mind that there's no combat in this game. You won't be running around with laser blasters or guns or rocket launchers, anything like that, or shooting anyone, because that is not the focus of the game. This game is purely about story, first and foremost, but also about the stealth elements as well as the traversal across the planet. And the planet really is the star of the show in many different ways. I found the planet of Persephone to be starkly interesting, both because of the environments itself, but also because, well, it's quite visually appealing. There's something that's very familiar if you're used to certain areas and biomes on Earth, such as, well, frozen regions, but also there's something very alien about it as well, and you'll notice these in the smaller hints. Little bits of ice floating around in the mid-air, something that you might initially think is a glitch, and I'm sure the characters also thought the same, that reality seems to be glitching. But that's due to the nature of Persephone and the very fact that they're looking for something very specific that they call the source. This also factors back into the gameplay, where you'll find some strange phenomena that you can interact with your EM tool, and that specifically allows you to access other areas of the game that you might not otherwise be able to get to. For example, right here, you need to scan through the EM frequency until you're able to interact with a particular phenomena in the environment, and that allows you to, well, kind of get a little bit further through the game. And that means that with the planet being such a heavy focus, you're also going to have a lot of environmental factors playing on you as you explore. Now, some of this could be climbing. You'll no doubt seen a lot of climbing along the way. Other bits can be things such as ice. These ice layers are absolutely deadly, and you're going to both need to ensure you cross the right locations as well as you go very carefully, because if you're too fast, the ice will crack and you will fall through. Also noticed quite a few other dangers, such as storms, as well as the alien itself. And the alien, the Nemesis, it's actually called the Nemesis in-game, is actually very intimidating. But this is where the stealth comes in, because generally it responds to sound. Occasionally it comes up quite close to me, and I actually was sitting there thinking, oh my god, it's actually going to find me in a minute, only for it to move away at the last second, just so long as you stay quiet and proceed very, very carefully. Now, as we're moving slightly further into the video, I do want to talk about a few different story elements. Quite early in the game then, when you first start playing Thomas, you'll locate very briefly a different biome. The planet initially seems like a frozen wasteland, but there's also its polar opposite, a complete blasted wasteland, a desert. And this is quite a surprise, but it's also not the only surprise that the game offers up. And as you explore further and get deeper into that desert, you'll uncover quite a profound mystery, something that was entirely unexpected. Suffice to say, throughout the game, the characters are presented with a number of different challenges, not least of which is having to finally choose between the mission, the objective that they were sent up there for by humanity, and perhaps to save humanity or to save each other, because both of these are not possible at the same time. And this is it's a deeply emotional choice that the characters are presented with multiple times throughout their journey. And like I say, if you've played Don't Nod's other game, Life is Strange, you'll be quite familiar with the way that the developers actually present these types of dilemmas. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not that you have a choice in how all of this plays out. It's a fairly linear game. In fact, it's a very linear game. But the point is, it feels literally like you're walking through a movie or through a book. So that's definitely something to keep in mind, because your main interest in this is going to be if you're really into heavily narrative-driven games. The gameplay itself, meanwhile, is mainly focused on walking, climbing, and trying to avoid being detected by the hostile alien presence. It was certainly enough to keep me gripped, because I always found myself wanting to know what was around the next corner, both literally, in the sense of getting through the next cave, getting over the next mountain, finding what's through the next door, but also figuratively in the sense of just wondering how the story itself is going to play out. Are the characters going to meet up? Are they going to be able to save each other? How are they going to overcome the various different threats that this world presents them with? I found Thomas's chapters to be really intriguing, mainly because of that, largely because of the way he uncovers the different parts of the story and the background of the things that have been going on Persephone. Largely events that have been hidden from humanity, I guess is a way we could put it. Aphelion, meanwhile, has a very different story, because there's a lot of climbing and other activity going on here, and that is a nice pace breaker between the sections where you play as Thomas. There is a huge focus on climbing here though, and that can be quite challenging in a number of different ways. Firstly, because I found myself quite frequently having to locate and plan my route. Like I say, very early on in the game you get the yellow handholds, which makes it very clear where you've got to progress, but as you move further into the game it becomes quite a bit more of a challenge to actually understand where you've got to go, and this can be a bit of a hit and miss, and you'll find yourself perhaps retreading pathways to try and uncover the route and the most effective way to avoid the hostiles or the environmental hazards. Climbing is a frequent event as well, and you'll find yourself doing a lot of it. The only real issue I had with the climbing sections is the frequency with which the character actually slips her grip and kind of just, as you see here, slips off the ledge with her right hand. This happens very frequently, and I do feel that there's perhaps opportunity to dial that back just a little and keep that climbing that much more immersive. The point for me then with Aphelion and the world it's set on, Persephone, is that there's quite a lot of different factors involved in your journey through it. One minute you'll be walking through ice, another minute you're in caves, another chapter you're traversing through corridors with flames chasing at you, or just trying to locate your way around the maze-like labyrinthine buildings. And ultimately, the star of the show is the planet Persephone, but it's also the way that the story is told as well. Both things which Don't Nod seem to excel at. So if this sounds of interest to you, do check out those links in the video description where you can find out everything you need to know. Aphelion is out now on Xbox Series, PS5 and Steam. And to celebrate the launch, it's also got a 10% discount for a limited time. Like I say, do check out those links. Meanwhile, if you want to keep watching, there's a short clip from some interviews here. So, as you know by now, Aphelion was made in partnership with ESA, and they recently grabbed some time with some space exploration specialists to talk about how Hope One's missions, as well as Persephone itself, were informed by real-world science. The interviews, of course, are well worth a listen to, and here's a really interesting clip from them.
I think for the human body, what we fail to take into account is that our fine motor skills in our fingers, like you start to lose that much earlier than you actually feel the cold. So performing any type of fine motor skills, unscrewing some screws, or even perhaps punching in the code on a keypad will be really difficult. And for the tech, most tech, well, I would hope they would design tech to operate at these low temperatures. But if any technology, if any electronics is made to operate outside the temperature range it's actually designed at, it starts to act very strangely. Like one example is that the battery capacity drops really quickly as it gets colder.
Geysers. We hypothesized about this. I explained how life could survive in these conditions. Oh, I wish I could tell someone.
So what would be the key signs you're looking for when trying to figure out if life exists on a frozen world or moon somewhere in our solar system? It's a very interesting question. It's also very relevant. At ESA, we're currently preparing for a mission to an icy moon of Saturn, the little moon Enceladus. And there's three things you look for. You look for liquid water, you look for a source of energy, and you look for the basic building materials for life, like the basic atoms and the basic molecules. And when I talk about the energy source, it is both the source to keep the liquid ocean liquid and the energy source for life to actually live from. So on Enceladus, it's quite interesting. We also have a not so mysterious source, but we have a source of energy outside of Enceladus itself. It's actually the tidal forces enacted by Saturn upon Enceladus that keeps the subsurface ocean warm and liquid. And also this gives enough energy that there are hydrothermal vents at the bottom of the ocean floor that there might be life at. So how realistic is it that we would be able to explore such an icy world as Persephone in this game? I think a robotic mission is likely. We are currently preparing one at ESA going to the moon of Enceladus around Saturn. Going there with humans, I think like we're already now a bit struggling to going back to the moon and even then onwards to Mars. So I think perhaps within the next 100 years, perhaps exploratory missions, but going there to live, I think it will take longer than that because there's quite a few technologies that we have not yet developed that will be needed to actually survive on such inhospitable environments.